Back in 1953, a single pot on the stove could feed a family of 6 for under $1. One pan, one burner, one wooden spoon, and supper was on the table by 6. No food processor, no air fryer, no 12 dirty dishes piled in the sink afterward. Just honest, filling cooking that stretched a paycheck and warmed a kitchen at the same time. If you're cooking for one these days, these recipes were practically made for you. They scale down beautifully, they reheat even better, and most cost less than a fast food value meal. Grab a cup of coffee and settle in, because we're counting down 30 forgotten one-pot dinners from the 1950s, the kind your mother used to make when money was tight, but nobody ever left the table hungry. I collected 100 of the best old-school meals into one cookbook. You can find it below. Let's start with number 30. Number 30, hamburger hash. Before hamburger helper showed up in 1971, every housewife in America had her own version of hamburger hash. 1 pound of ground beef, browned in a cast iron skillet with a chopped onion, then diced potatoes thrown right on top with a splash of water and the lid clamped down tight. 20 minutes later, the potatoes were tender, the bottom had crisped into a golden brown crust, and a shake of black pepper finished it off. Ground beef cost about 49 cents a pound in 1955, and one skillet fed a hungry family with leftovers for breakfast. The smell of frying onions and beef would drift out the kitchen window and pull the kids in from the yard. Number 29, tuna noodle skillet. Long before the casserole version went into the oven, this was a stovetop one-pan meal. A can of tuna, a handful of egg noodles, a can of cream of mushroom soup, and a splash of milk all simmered together in one heavy skillet until the noodles drank up the sauce. Frozen peas were stirred in at the end for color. A can of chicken of the sea cost 29 cents. The noodles were maybe a dime, and you had supper on the table in 15 minutes flat. Mothers loved it because it used pantry staples that never spoiled. Kids loved it because of those crispy noodle bits stuck to the edge of the pan. Number 28, American goulash. This had nothing to do with Hungary. American goulash was elbow macaroni, ground beef, chopped onion, a can of tomato sauce, a can of diced tomatoes, and a sprinkle of paprika, all cooked together in one big pot until the noodles absorbed every drop of sauce. By the time the spoon could stand up in the pot, supper was ready. A pound of macaroni cost 17 cents in 1956, and this dish stretched half a pound of beef into enough food for 2 days. Church cookbooks across the Midwest printed dozens of versions, every grandmother insisting hers was the original. The smell of tomato and beef simmering meant Tuesday night in a million American homes. Hoover stew. Named for the Depression era but kept alive well into the 1950s. By families who remembered hard times, Hoover stew was a pot of sliced hot dogs, canned tomatoes, elbow macaroni, and a can of pork and beans, all simmered together for 20 minutes. That was it. Total cost in 1954 was about 60 cents to feed 5 people. It tasted better than it had any right to, salty and rich and comforting in a way fancy food never quite manages. The hot dogs swelled up tender, the beans thickened the broth, and the macaroni soaked up the tomato. Every spoonful was warm and filling and forgiving on tired teeth. Number 26, ham and beans soup. Sunday's ham bone never got thrown away. It went straight into a stock pot Monday morning with a bag of dried navy beans, a chopped onion, a couple of carrots, and enough water to cover. Then it simmered low and slow all afternoon while Mother did the laundry until the beans turned creamy and the meat fell clean off the bone. A bag of navy beans cost 12 cents, and that ham bone was already paid for. By supper time, the kitchen smelled like smoke and butter, and a single bowl with crackers crumbled on top was enough to put a working man to sleep in his armchair. Number 25. Chicken and dumplings. A whole stewing hen, the cheap, tough old laying birds that cost about 35 cents a pound, went into a Dutch oven with water, an onion, a couple of celery stalks, and salt. After 2 hours, the meat was falling off the bone, and that's when Mother stirred up a quick biscuit dough with flour, baking powder, and milk, and dropped it in spoonfuls right on top of the bubbling broth. The lid went on, and 10 minutes later those dumplings had puffed up into pillowy clouds. One pot, one chicken, one supper that cost pennies and tasted like Sunday at Grandma's house. Number 24. Beef stew, the classic. A pound of chuck roast cut into cubes, browned right in the Dutch oven, then onions, carrots, potatoes, and a couple of cups of water with a beef bouillon cube crumbled in. 2 hours on a low flame, and that tough chuck became fork tender, the broth thick with potato starch and beef juices. A bay leaf if you had one, salt and pepper if you did not. The whole thing cost under $1 in 1955 and fed the family Monday night, then again Wednesday, because the second day was always better. The smell would hang in the curtains for days, and nobody ever complained about that. Number 23. Pork chops and rice. 4 cheap pork chops browned in the skillet, then 1 cup of long grain rice scattered around them, 2 cups of water, a sliced onion, and a can of tomatoes poured over the top. The lid went on, and the whole thing simmered for 40 minutes while Mother set the table. The rice cooked in the pork drippings and tomato juice, turning a pretty pink color and absorbing every bit of flavor. Pork chops cost about 55 cents a pound at the A&P, and this dish made 4 chops feed 6 people. The chops came out tender, the rice came out flavorful, and the skillet only needed a quick wipe. Number 22. Spanish rice with ground beef. Half a pound of ground beef browned in a heavy skillet with a chopped green pepper and an onion, then 1 cup of rice, 1 can of tomatoes, and 2 cups of water. You could add a teaspoon of chili powder if you were feeling adventurous. Put the lid on, simmer for 20 minutes, and supper was done. This was on every home economics class menu in the 1950s because it was nutritious, cheap, and impossible to mess up. The rice turned a deep tomato red, the beef gave it body, and the green pepper added just enough sweetness. It cost 20 cents a serving, and the whole family cleaned their plates without complaint. Number 21. Sausage and sauerkraut. A pound of smoked sausage cut into chunks, a big jar of sauerkraut, a couple of peeled potatoes quartered, and a splash of water all went into 1 pot. 45 minutes of low simmering, and the potatoes had absorbed the tangy sauerkraut juice, while the sausage perfumed everything with smoke. German and Polish families across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Wisconsin built whole winter menus around this dish. A jar of kraut cost 15 cents, the sausage maybe 60 cents a pound, and 1 pot fed 4 hungry adults. Served with a slice of buttered rye bread, it was the kind of supper that warmed you from the inside on a January night. Number 20. Red beans and rice. Down in Louisiana, Monday was wash day, and red beans simmered on the back of the stove all morning while Mother scrubbed the laundry. The usual ingredients were a bag of dried red beans, a ham hock or some leftover ham scraps, an onion, a green pepper, a couple of garlic cloves, and water. By noon, the beans were creamy and the broth was thick. Spoon it over a mound of white rice, and you had a supper that cost less than $1/4 a serving. Louis Armstrong used to sign his letters, "Red beans and ricely yours." That shows how beloved this dish was. Every Monday for 100 years. Number 19. Corn chowder. A few strips of bacon were crisped in the bottom of the pot. Then a chopped onion was sweated in the bacon grease, followed by diced potatoes, 2 cans of creamed corn, 1 can of evaporated milk, and enough water to make it soupy. Salt, pepper, and 20 minutes of gentle simmering. That was the whole recipe. Evaporated milk gave it a richness that fresh milk could not match, and the bacon laid a smoky foundation under the sweet corn. A can of creamed corn cost 14 cents in 1957, and this chowder cost under 50 cents to make a pot big enough to feed the family twice, with crackers crumbled on top. Number 18. Split pea soup. A bag of dried split peas, the leftover Sunday ham bone, a chopped onion, 2 diced carrots, and water to cover. You simmered it for 2 hours until the peas dissolved into a thick green pottage and the ham fell off the bone. That was it. No fancy spices, no cream, no garnish. Split peas cost 19 cents a bag and could feed a family for 2 days. The soup was so thick, a spoon would stand straight up in it, and the smoky ham flavor went all the way through. Mothers loved it because it cost almost nothing. Fathers loved it because it stuck to your ribs through a long shift at the factory. Number 17. Pot roast. A tough cut of chuck or rump roast, seared brown in the Dutch oven, then surrounded with quartered potatoes, carrots, and onions. A cup of water, a couple of bay leaves, salt and pepper, and the lid clamped down tight. 3 hours in a 325-degree oven, and that miserable, cheap roast had transformed into something a king would eat. The vegetables drank up the meat juices, and the gravy practically made itself in the bottom of the pot. A 4-pound chuck roast cost about $1.50 in 1956, and Sunday pot roast was the centerpiece of American family life for decades. 1 pan, 1 knife, 1 unforgettable supper. Number 16. Chicken a la king. A can of cream of chicken soup, a can of evaporated milk, a chopped pimento, a handful of frozen peas, and whatever leftover cooked chicken you had, all warmed together in 1 saucepan and ladled over toaster biscuits. It took about 8 minutes from start to finish, and it tasted like something served at the Waldorf. A jar of pimentos cost a dime and lasted a month. Every church potluck in 1955 had a chafing dish of chicken a la king on the table, and every working mother kept the ingredients on hand for a quick weeknight supper, creamy, savory, and forgiving of whatever odds and ends were in the icebox. Number 15. Creamed chipped beef on toast. Soldiers called it SOS, but at home it was Sunday night supper for millions of families. A jar of dried beef shredded into a skillet with a couple of tablespoons of butter, a sprinkle of flour, and 2 cups of milk stirred in slowly until it thickened into a rich, salty cream sauce. Spooned over toast, it was hot, filling, and ready in 5 minutes. A jar of dried beef cost 23 cents and stretched to feed 4. Some mothers added a pinch of black pepper or a dash of Worcestershire. Kids who turned up their noses at it as children grew up to crave it as adults. Number 14. Frankfurter and potato skillet. 6 hot dogs sliced into coins, 4 diced potatoes, 1 chopped onion, and a couple of tablespoons of bacon grease in a heavy skillet. Cover and cook over medium-low for 25 minutes, stirring once or twice. The potatoes browned, the hot dogs released their salty, smoky flavor, and the onions melted into sweetness. A pack of Franks cost 39 cents in 1956. The potatoes were practically free, and this skillet supper cost less than 50 cents to feed a family. Mothers in a hurry made it on Friday nights when the weekly grocery money had run thin. Simple, hot, satisfying, and only one pan to wash. Number 13. Macaroni and tomatoes. As humble as it gets. A box of elbow macaroni is boiled until tender, then drained. A can of stewed tomatoes is poured back in, along with a tablespoon of butter, a teaspoon of sugar, and salt and pepper. They are stirred together over low heat until everything is warm. That was the whole supper. Total cost, maybe 20 cents. Southern families kept this in heavy rotation through the lean years, and they never stopped making it because it was honestly delicious. The sugar mellowed the acid in the tomatoes, the butter made it rich, and the pasta soaked up every drop. Comfort food in its purest, simplest form. Number 12. Hamburger stroganoff. A pound of ground beef was browned with chopped onion. Then a can of cream of mushroom soup was stirred in, along with half a cup of sour cream and a splash of water. Egg noodles went right into the same skillet with another cup of water. The lid went on, and 10 minutes later the noodles had cooked and the sauce had thickened into something creamy and rich. A working mother could have this on the table in 20 minutes flat. It tasted like the fancy beef stroganoff from the steakhouse, but cost about a quarter of the price. The Betty Crocker cookbook had a version, and so did every neighbor on the block. Number 11. Unstuffed cabbage skillet. Polish and Ukrainian grandmothers in Chicago and Cleveland had been making stuffed cabbage rolls forever, but the busy 1950s housewife learned to deconstruct it. Brown 1 pound of ground beef in a Dutch oven with onion. Dump in 1 chopped head of cabbage, 1 cup of rice, 1 can of tomato sauce, and 2 cups of water. Put the lid on and simmer for 30 minutes. All the flavor of cabbage rolls without the hour spent rolling them. The cabbage went sweet and tender. The rice cooked right in the tomato broth, and 1 pot fed 6. A whole head of cabbage cost a nickel. This was peasant cooking at its absolute finest. Number 10. Liver and onion skillet. Beef liver was the cheapest meat at the butcher counter, about 19 cents a pound in 1954. It was packed with iron, which doctors recommended for everyone. Mother sliced the liver thin, dredged it in flour, then fried it quickly in bacon grease alongside a heaping pile of sliced onions until both turned golden. Diced potatoes went in for the last 15 minutes, soaking up all the drippings. The trick was not to overcook the liver, because it would turn tough as shoe leather. Done right, it was tender, savory, and rich, and the whole supper came out of 1 cast iron skillet. Number 9. Johnny Marzetti. This Ohio classic was named after a Columbus restaurant owner's brother, and it spread across the Midwest in the 1950s. Brown a pound of ground beef with onion and green pepper. Stir in a can of tomato soup and a can of diced tomatoes. Dump in cooked elbow macaroni and a handful of shredded cheddar, and simmer until the cheese melted through. School cafeterias served it on Wednesdays. Church basement suppers featured it at every potluck. It cost almost nothing to make, and it disappeared off the plate faster than Mother could serve seconds. Kids who grew up in Columbus or Cincinnati still get misty-eyed at the name. A can of pink salmon, about 35 cents in 1955, flaked into a skillet with 1 cup of rice, 2 cups of water, 1 chopped onion, and 1 tablespoon of butter. A pinch of dill if you had it, or lemon juice if you did not. Cover and simmer for 18 minutes until the rice drank up the broth. The salmon perfumed the whole pot with that mild, rich flavor, and the rice came out tinted pink and tasting of the sea. Catholic families ate this on Friday nights when meat was off the table. It was cheap and filling, and it gave you a full day's calcium from those soft little salmon bones. Number 7. Haluski, cabbage and egg noodle skillet. Polish and Slovak immigrants brought this to the steel towns of Pennsylvania, and by the 1950s it was on every supper table from Pittsburgh to Bethlehem. Half a stick of butter melted in a big skillet. A whole head of cabbage was chopped and tossed in, then cooked low and slow until the cabbage turned golden and almost candied. Then a pound of cooked egg noodles went in, along with plenty of salt and pepper. That was it. The cabbage went from harsh to sweet. The noodles soaked up the buttery juices, and one skillet fed the whole family. A nickel's worth of cabbage and a dime's worth of noodles made supper for 6. Number 6, lima beans and ham. A bag of dried lima beans, soaked overnight, then simmered with a ham hock or a chunk of leftover ham, an onion and water for 2 hours, until the beans turned soft and creamy. A pat of butter stirred in at the end, salt and pepper to taste. Served in a deep bowl with cornbread on the side, this was one of the most filling, nourishing, and forgotten suppers in the American pantry. Lima beans cost 14 cents a bag in 1955 and could feed a family for 2 days. The broth turned silky from the bean starch, and the smoky ham flavor went all the way through to the bottom of the pot. Number 5, American skillet shepherd's pie. No oven required. Brown a pound of ground beef in a heavy skillet with onion. Drain the fat, then stir in a can of mixed vegetables and a can of tomato soup. Spoon mashed potatoes right on top. Sprinkle with shredded cheese. Cover the skillet and let it cook on low for 10 minutes until the cheese melted and the potatoes warmed through. The whole supper used what was already in the kitchen and dirtied exactly 1 pan. Mothers in tiny apartment kitchens with 2-burner stoves loved this dish because it did not need an oven and it did not need a single extra dish. Number 4, potato soup with bacon. 4 strips of bacon crisped in the bottom of a heavy pot, then a chopped onion sweated in the drippings until soft. 6 diced potatoes, 4 cups of water, salt and pepper, and a simmer for 25 minutes until the potatoes started falling apart. A can of evaporated milk was poured in at the end, a pat of butter added, and the crumbled bacon scattered on top. That was supper. A bag of potatoes cost 39 cents and made enough soup for 3 nights of meals. The broth was creamy without cream, the potatoes were tender, and the bacon gave every spoonful that smoky little punch. Crackers on top finished it off. Number 3, beef and barley soup. A small chuck roast or a few beef shanks browned in a stock pot. Then add onions, carrots, celery, a can of tomatoes, a cup of pearl barley, and enough water to fill the pot. It simmered for 2.5 hours until the meat was falling apart and the barley had swelled into tender little pearls that thickened the whole broth. This was Polish and Jewish grandmother cooking that crossed over into mainstream American homes by the 1950s because it was cheap, nourishing, and it made the kitchen smell incredible. Pearl barley cost 18 cents a box and lasted 6 months. 1 pot fed the family on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and nobody got tired of it. Number 2, boiled dinner. Corned beef brisket, the cheapest cut at the butcher, simmered in a big pot of water for 3 hours, then quartered cabbage, halved potatoes, and chunks of carrot were added for the last 45 minutes. Everything cooked together in 1 pot, taking on the salty, beefy flavor of the brisket. New England families ate this on Thursdays. Irish families ate it on St. Patrick's Day and every Sunday in between. A corned beef brisket cost 49 cents a pound in 1956. 1 pot fed 8 people with leftovers for hash the next morning. It was served with mustard or horseradish on the side. It was honest, hot, and hearty. There is a full cookbook with 100 of the best meals. You can get it below. Number 1, mulligan stew. Topping our list, because it represents the very heart of one-pot depression and post-war cooking. Mulligan stew was whatever you had. Hobos cooked it in tin cans over open fires, and housewives cooked it in Dutch ovens on the back of the stove. A handful of beef, or pork, or chicken, or even hot dogs, and whatever vegetables were in the bin. Potatoes, carrots, onions, turnips, cabbage, celery, and the wilting tomato. Add a can of beans if you had one, a bouillon cube, water, salt and pepper. Simmered low for an hour, sometimes 2 hours. No two pots were ever the same, and that was the whole point. Mulligan's stew taught a generation that supper did not need a recipe. It needed a pot, a fire, and whatever the good Lord provided that day. It was thrift turned into tradition, and the smell of it cooking meant nobody in the house was going to bed hungry. For a senior cooking for one today, it is the perfect philosophy. Open the fridge, see what is there, and make supper out of it. That's our countdown. 30 forgotten one-pot suppers that fed a generation on pennies and patience. Pick one this week, dust off a pot, and bring a little of that 1950s warmth back into your kitchen. Which one are you going to try first? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, hit that subscribe button for more. Take care of yourselves, and happy cooking.